For years after my death, Grandma dug out my old mobile phone and dialed Kaylin's number. Kaylin, Sylvie, it's been a whole 4 years. Only now do you think of calling me? What's the matter? Is your sugar daddy out of money? If you're short of money, then go sell yourself. Stop pretending to be pitiful in front of me. I'm telling you, I don't want to see you even for a moment, not even if you were dead. Grandma on this end of the phone was a bit stunned. Her hunched back looked extremely lonely. She held the phone carefully and asked timidly, Kaylin, did you quarrel with Sylvie? I can't find Sylvie. After saying that, Grandma looked at the empty room with her cloudy eyes and as if remembering something, she murmured, oh right, Sylvie is dead. She's gone. How could I forget again? 01 Perhaps because I couldn't bear to leave Grandma alone, I stayed by her side after my death. Unfortunately, Grandma had Alzheimer's disease and often forgot that I had already passed away. This time, she had another episode of the illness and went to the park alone, forgetting the way home. The stubborn old lady sat on the bench, still muttering to herself, it doesn't matter if I can't find the way. When Sylvie finds that I'm not at home, she will surely come out to look for me. My spirit stayed by Grandma's side. Although she wasn't far from home, since she couldn't hear me, I couldn't guide her in the right direction. Seeing that the sun was about to set, as a spirit, I began to jump around anxiously. An old lady nearly 80 years old would surely not be able to endure spending the night alone in the park if she didn't get home in time. Fortunately, Grandma also seemed to realize this. Looking at the fewer and fewer people around, she finally stood up. She walked forward, grabbed a person and asked, have you seen my granddaughter Sylvie? I knew that as long as Grandma asked someone and they talked a bit more, they would understand Grandma's situation and would probably take her to the police station. Once at the police station, Grandma could get home safely. Unfortunately, Grandma asked the wrong person. Because the person she grabbed was precisely Kaylin. Kaylin looked at Grandma with a hint of impatience in his tone. Where's Sylvie? Why are you here alone? It's so late and she still left you, an old lady, in the park. She must be fooling around with 02 Perhaps because of Grandma, he didn't say the last few words. But I knew what he meant. He wanted to say that she must be hanging out with some other man again. Look, even 4 years after my death, this man's dislike for me hadn't diminished at all. Grandma didn't understand what he meant. Instead, she was quite happy to see Kaylin. Kaylin, you haven't come to our house for dinner for a long time. Don't you like the dumplings made by Grandma the most? Tomorrow is your birthday. Come to our house to eat dumplings. You young people should get along well when you're in a relationship. Sylvie is a good girl in every way, except that she likes to keep things to herself. When Sylvie went out today, she said she was going to buy you a birthday present and give you a surprise tomorrow. It turned out that Grandma's memory stayed on this day. At that time, we were still deeply in love, just as affectionate as all the other passionate couples in the world. And his childhood sweetheart hadn't shown up yet. What a pity. Hearing this, Kaylin curled his lips with a sarcastic smile. Grandma, this isn't funny. I've already broken up with Sylvie. You said she went out to buy me a birthday present. Maybe she's buying a birthday present for another man. Grandma was taken aback. You broke up? But Sylvie never told me. Kaylin, don't be angry. When Sylvie comes back, I'll teach her a lesson. The old lady looked really cute when she was angry. I wanted to hug her and tell her not to be angry, but my body just passed through Grandma's body. 4 years had passed, and I still hadn't gotten used to being just a spirit. 03 Kaylin laughed even harder. Obviously, he didn't believe Grandma's words. I've told you that we really broke up. If all these are tricks taught by Sylvie, I'll forgive it just this once. Please don't mention her name in front of me again. Just then, 2 old ladies from the same neighborhood came over. They were quite surprised to see Grandma. Auntie, it's so late. Why haven't you gone home yet? Could it be that you've forgotten where your home is again? After saying that, she clicked her tongue and sighed to the other old lady. Speaking of which, this old lady is really pitiful. She and her granddaughter depended on each other. Who would have thought that 4 years ago, her granddaughter died, leaving only her alone. Yes, I died 4 years ago. I remembered that on my birthday 4 years ago, I went out cheerfully to buy him a present, but then I saw him walking around with another woman in the mall. After walking out in a daze, I received a private message from a stranger on my social media app. When I opened it, there was a selfie of a girl wearing a man's white shirt and lying on the messy white sheets in a hotel. Besides the photo, there was also a sentence attached. They say a childhood sweetheart can't compete with a new love. Do you think my childhood sweetheart can win? I recognized that white shirt. I sewed the top button on it myself. I remembered it so clearly because the little flower I sewed on it was learned from a blogger online. Kalen didn't mind it at all. He even wore it to important meetings. He said it was a symbol of our love. But now, this symbol appeared on another woman. Only then did I realize that love could be so cheap. 04 Hearing what the old ladies said, Kalen froze all over. All kinds of emotions flashed across his face one after another. Finally, he asked in disbelief, "What are you talking about? Sylvie is dead? Are you lying to me? It must be Sylvie who asked you to say this. This woman is so good at sweet talking." The two old ladies were quite shocked. While helping Grandma, they muttered, "Who is this guy? Could he be crazy?" Exactly. Who would dare to talk nonsense about someone's death? That's like cursing others. At this time, Grandma also seemed to remember. She opened her mouth, her lips trembling, and finally said, "Yes, Sylvie. Sylvie is gone." Kalen stood there blankly, looking a bit ridiculous. And my floating spirit followed the two old ladies who were helping Grandma and floated back home together. Even when Grandma entered the house, I was glad that fortunately Kalen didn't follow. Perhaps because of remembering my death, Grandma was very sad. The lonely old lady sat on the sofa, stroking my photo with her skinny hands and weeping quietly. "You're such a young girl. How could you leave before Grandma?" I floated over, wanting to wipe away her tears, but I passed right through. I could only cry and comfort her. "Grandma, Sylvie hasn't left. Sylvie is right here." Unfortunately, Grandma couldn't hear me. At this moment, the doorbell rang, and then Kalen's voice came, "Grandma, open the door. It's me, Kalen." I was shocked. No, I couldn't let him in. If he came in and found my old things. 05 I didn't dare to think about what the consequences would be. Grandma was a bit slow. Hearing the doorbell and the call, she slowly turned her head. She seemed to be thinking. Kalen's voice from outside came again, "Grandma, just let me in." "Sylvie, I just thought about it calmly. How could you be dead? You just want to trick me into coming here. I'm already here. Stop pretending. Open the door quickly." He roared and then impatiently rang the doorbell. I was very angry. His yelling like this would scare Grandma. He wasn't like this before. Whether it was to me or to Grandma, he used to speak softly, fearing that his tone might be a bit too harsh. But now, besides ringing the doorbell, he had already started banging on the door. I was so angry and resentful that I rushed to the door, wanting to beat him up. As a spirit, I just passed through the door. Even though I waved my fists angrily, I could only pass through it lightly. Because I couldn't teach Kalen a lesson, I became even angrier and finally even cried out of anger. But I was just a spirit, and even crying didn't feel as cathartic as it used to. I was so angry that I cursed him. "Yes, I'm tricking you. Go away quickly. It's best that you never come back in this lifetime." Just when I was losing my temper, there was a click sound inside the house. I was afraid that something might happen to Grandma, so I quickly rushed inside. Fortunately, Grandma was still sitting safely on the chair, but the photo frame in her hand had fallen to the ground. Grandma looked as if she had just woken up. She looked at the photo frame on the ground, bent down to pick it up. Then she held it in her hand and wiped my photo again and again. "It's dirty." Sylvie liked this photo the most. Fortunately, it wasn't broken. Yes, this was the photo I liked the most before. Because Kalen took this photo for me. Actually, I wanted to tell Grandma that now this photo wasn't my favorite anymore. My favorite one was the photo of me and her beside her hand. At this moment, after Grandma said that, she stood up tremblingly and put the photo frame back in its original position. She stood there quietly, with a smile on her face again. I sniffed. I didn't know whether it was good or bad that the old lady had this disease. Look, the old lady's illness had been acting up frequently recently. She had forgotten that her Sylvie was already dead again. At this time, the door was knocked on again at an inappropriate time. Grandma answered, "Coming, coming." After saying that, she walked slowly to the door. The moment the door opened, Kaylin's angry face was still clearly visible. "Where's Sylvie?" After saying that, Kaylin's eyes looked around. I knew that Kaylin was looking for me. Grandma was very fond of cleanliness and often cleaned the house. Since she got Alzheimer's disease, sometimes when I squatted aside, I could see Grandma cleaning the house twice. The only difference was that 4 years had passed, and the house still remained the same as before. "Is it Kaylin?" The old lady became even cuter after losing her memory. She greeted Kaylin enthusiastically, "Come in and sit down." "Sylvie." "Sylvie has gone out." "Yes, she's gone out. But where has she gone?" She said that and then turned to look out of the window, murmuring, "It's already dark. Sylvie will surely be back soon. This girl has never spent a night outside. She said she would feel at ease only when she stays with me at night." Kaylin didn't seem to be in the mood to listen to Grandma's words. Especially after hearing from Grandma that I had gone out, the sarcasm in his eyes grew even stronger. He was mocking me from the bottom of his heart. Fortunately, he still had some decency and didn't say anything too harsh. Instead, he walked towards my room. Since he had already come in and I couldn't stop him, I simply floated beside him to see what he would do next. The moment he turned the doorknob, the pink-themed room came into view. Grandma had carefully prepared this room for me. Grandma was very skillful with her hands. Even the pink curtains inside were sewn by her stitch by stitch. I liked this place very much. Even after I died, I would float around here and lie on the bed to take a rest. Unfortunately, as a spirit, I didn't need to sleep and wouldn't feel sleepy. After opening the door, Kaylin continued walking inside. His eyes fell on the photo of him and me on the table. A hint of surprise flashed in his eyes, but it was quickly replaced by sarcasm. "Don't you already have another man? Why keep this photo? To reminisce about how badly you tricked me before? Sylvie, the thing I regret the most in my life is having loved you." After saying that, he roughly opened the photo album, took out the photos inside, and tore them into pieces directly. He was still so angry that he threw the torn pieces hard onto the table. I pursed my lips. "It was you who betrayed me first. Why are you so aggrieved and angry now?" Grandma stood at the door with a glass of juice and asked blankly, "Kaylin, what are you doing?" Because she was angry, the old lady's steps became a bit brisk. She angrily put the juice on the cabinet. Seeing that Kaylin had torn the photo of him and me, she immediately argued, "Kaylin, you are her boyfriend. How could you do this?" 08 Grandma also knew that Kaylin wouldn't have done such a thing before. He used to be so gentle. My acquaintance with Kaylin was purely accidental. He was the heir to the Kaylin family group, while I was just a newcomer who had just entered society. The Kaylin family group was almost the dream of all fresh graduates in City A. The salary was high and the benefits were good. Once you got a job there, it was something you could show off at class reunions. And I happened to be one of the lucky ones who got an internship opportunity through campus recruitment. Unfortunately, the workplace was far more complicated than I had imagined. I remembered that in the first month after I joined the company organized a department gathering. The department manager, Zhang Chuang, was a senior of mine. We had met a few times when we were at school. At the gathering, he insisted on asking me and another female colleague who joined the company at the same time to have a drink with him, claiming that this department gathering was prepared for the two of us. He even patted me on the shoulder and leaned over, saying, "Sylvie, I couldn't decline, so I had to drink 2 glasses reluctantly." However, the girl sitting beside me had already turned pale. She held the glass of boiled water in her hand, looking a bit at a loss. She pitifully told me in a low voice that she was allergic to alcohol, the department manager took the lead and held up his wine glass, insisting that newcomers had to drink a glass. The girl looked embarrassed. Being timid, she can only explain in a low voice, "I'm sorry, Manager Zhang. I'm allergic to alcohol and can't drink." Upon hearing this, the department manager immediately laughed, "I'm also allergic to alcohol, but it's okay to drink a little. Xiao Su, people in society should learn to drink a little, you know?" Several other people also joined in the jeering, and the scene was chaotic. I don't know where I got the courage from. I stood up to drink on her behalf. "Manager Zhang, she really can't drink. If it doesn't work, I'll drink this glass for her. What do you think?" 09 Just like that, under the jeering of those people, I drank 6 glasses in a row until finally, I felt dizzy all over. When I was resting on the sofa, I saw Kalen sitting beside me. He sat there quietly, with handsome features and a cold expression. Perhaps because I had drunk too much, I boldly looked straight at him, and he was holding a wine glass in his hand and also looking at me with interest. Our eyes met, and I know that was the kind of feeling of being attracted. Even when I passed out drunk, I was still thinking, how could there be such a good-looking man? When I regained consciousness again, I found that I was pinned against the wall in the bathroom. Because I was drunk, my whole body felt light. In a daze, I saw Zhang Chuang pinning me against the wall and reaching out to touch my pants. The shock made me a bit more sober, and I began to resist vigorously. "Senior, what are you doing?" Zhang Chuang was no longer the amiable and smiling appearance before. Instead, he had a lewd look on his face. "What am I doing? Of course, I want to be with you. Sylvie, I like you. Look how beautiful you are. How can I not be attracted to you? I promise that as long as you're with me, I'll assign you the next project. Once it's negotiated, I'll directly promote you to be the team leader." After saying that, Zhang Chuang started to move his mouth towards my face. I was weak all over, but I still resisted vigorously. I didn't want to ruin my life with such a scumbag. "Let me go. Manager Zhang, you're breaking the law, help. Someone, help." My shouts were not large, but the noise outside was not small. Just when I was about to threaten him with my life, the noise outside suddenly disappeared, then, the bathroom door was kicked open. I saw a high and straight figure appear, and then a heavy punch landed on Zhang Chuang's face. That person hugged me in his arms and took me away from that hellish place. And that person was Kalen. He was so charming back then. 10 At this moment, Kalen had a gloomy face and coldly watched Grandma tremblingly clean up the photo scraps on the table. "Grandma, I'm not her boyfriend. We broke up a long time ago. She betrayed me." Grandma's body froze, and it took her a while to react. "Sylvie wouldn't betray you. 9 out of 10 sentences she said were about you. She remembered what your favorite dishes were. Although she couldn't cook, she still insisted on cooking for you." Grandma's voice was interrupted by the vibration of Kalen's mobile phone. I accidentally glanced at it and saw 2 words displayed on his phone screen, Morgaine. His brows furrowed almost imperceptibly. Although his phone kept vibrating, he didn't answer it in time. I found it a bit funny. Men are really creatures who love the new and loathe the old. They get tired of something after having it for a long time. Didn't he love his mistress very much before? Now look at him. Who is he putting on this act for? The phone vibrated for a while and then stopped. Then it started vibrating again stubbornly. Kalen opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something, but finally, he held his phone and walked out. I was very curious whether they were married or not and what they would talk about. Well, I think maybe I'm really bored to actually want to know these things. So I followed Kalen and floated out of the room and then out of the door. "Hello." His voice was as pleasant as ever. Back then, I would often close my eyes and lean in his arms, listening to his magnetic voice echoing in my ears. It turns out that he could also be so gentle to another person. A voice came from the other end of the phone. "Kalen, how come you haven't come yet?" Kalen didn't hesitate at all and replied gently, "Got it. I'll be there right away." Sure enough, he loved her. Just like before, as long as Morgaine made a call, he would come immediately. 11 After hanging up the phone, I saw the man in front of me hesitate for a moment at the door. Grandma was sitting on the stool, still seeming unable to figure out why I broke up with Kaylin, whom I liked so much. She looked a bit sad. Kaylin just took a glance and then closed the door, then he walked towards the elevator. When he reached the elevator, I originally wanted to go back to accompany Grandma, but I caught a glimpse of him taking something out of his pocket. Wasn't the thing in his hand my mobile phone? This despicable thief. When did he steal my phone? I angrily rushed towards him, but still passed through his body. The elevator door opened, and he walked in. I sat on his shoulder angrily and cursed loudly. Kaylin, I didn't expect you to have such a hobby. This is theft. Don't you know you'll end up in the police station? I advise you to return the thing now, or I'll scold you to death. Don't you understand that you're a thief? Although I was roaring, he couldn't hear me at all. Instead, he put that mobile phone into his pocket and walked out of the community as if nothing had happened, and then got into the Maybach parked at the entrance. What was in the phone was what I worried about the most. Although I didn't want to see them being affectionate with each other, I still had to follow him into the car. However, the destination was not his home but a hotel. Looking at the familiar place, a certain part of my body seemed to wake up and hurt painfully. Why here? Why did they choose this hotel as the place for their date? And it was exactly the part where we were supposed to get engaged before. Watching him get out of the car, I shouted loudly, Kaylin, aren't you disgusting? Couldn't you choose another place? When I followed him and floated inside, I found that they were not on a date but getting engaged. Morgane was wearing a light blue fishtail dress and looked as beautiful as a princess in a fairy tale. Look, fairy tales are all lies. The princess and the prince are meant to be a couple. 12 Morgane happily walked up to meet him. Kaylin, where have you been? I couldn't find you anywhere. The Morgane in front of me had smiling eyes and her tone of voice was gentle, completely different from when she talked to me before. As she said that, she had already reached out to take Kaylin's arm out. I thought that after so many years and now that I'm no longer alive, I should be able to be more open-minded. But when I saw Morgane's affectionate gesture, I still couldn't help feeling disgusted. I don't know if Kaylin did it on purpose. At the moment when Morgane reached out her hand, he moved his steps to avoid her hand and instead walked towards Kaylin's mother. Father, mother. Morgane's hand missed, and a trace of ruthlessness flashed in her eyes, but she quickly withdrew it awkwardly. Suddenly, she looked in my direction, gritted her teeth and whispered, Sylvie, you damned woman. Are you still lingering around after all these years? I was stunned. Could it be that Morgane could see me? I reached out and waved my hand in front of her eyes. Fortunately, she couldn't see me. However, Morgane took a deep breath to adjust her emotions, then put on a smile again, turned around and walked towards Kaylin's parents. Kaylin. But Kaylin turned around and walked over, saying in a calm voice, the guests haven't all arrived yet. I'm going to the bathroom. You stay here and accompany Mom and Dad first. The words Mom and Dad made Morgane's eyes curve with a smile. She replied softly, okay. I didn't have time to care about what Morgane was chatting with Kaylin's parents because I saw Kaylin holding his mobile phone and quickly walking towards the bathroom. He wasn't going to the toilet but had other intentions. Sure enough, Kaylin walked to the corner of the corridor, took out his phone, and then pressed the power button. My heart began to pound wildly. Knowing that I couldn't snatch the phone away, I could only clench my fists and stare fixedly at his actions. 13 Soon the screen of the phone lit up. Just when I was on tenterhooks, the screen flickered and then went black directly. He tried again, but the phone still wouldn't turn on. That's right. It seemed that it had been more than a year since Grandma last charged it. It had just flickered, so maybe it was broken. However, Kaylin took out his own phone and dialed a number. Axel, come out for a moment. Axel was his assistant and came out quickly after receiving the call. Kaylin handed him my phone. Find someone to fix it as soon as possible. Also, check the information about Sylvie. Axel took the phone, a hint of doubt flashing in his eyes, but he still agreed. For years. It had been a whole 4 years before he thought of checking my information. It's a pity that I was already dead. I even began to imagine that when he learned that I was indeed dead, he would probably be very happy, right? After all, the woman he hated and didn't want to see even for a moment had finally disappeared from this world. Soon, Kalen was called back by his mother. The hotel was full of guests, all of them there to witness their happiness. I had once dreamed of this scene too, but unfortunately, I never got to see this day. Kalen was called onto the stage by the host and began to give a speech while I floated in front of him, flying back and forth. His brows were always furrowed tightly. I was indignant and leaned close to his ear and asked him, Kalen, you playboy. Since you've got what you wanted, what else are you dissatisfied with? Kalen couldn't hear me. His gaze, however, had been fixed on the direction of the door. I looked in the direction he was looking, but I didn't understand what he was waiting for. Was he waiting for Axel to come back and tell him that I was dead? So what if he knew? Suddenly, the MC handed the microphone to Kalen's mouth and asked with a smile, Mr. Kalen, do you wish that today was the day you married Miss Morgane? 14. The whole venue was silent. Everyone was staring at Kalen, and I also looked at him. His lips moved. He looked at Morgane beside him and was about to speak when his phone vibrated again. Excuse me. I need to take a call. After answering the call, I floated closer to him again and heard Axel's voice coming from the phone. President Kalen, Miss Sylvie might have died as early as 4 years ago. 4 years ago, there was a car accident where the vehicle plunged into the sea. There's evidence suggesting that the owner of the car was very likely Miss Sylvie. However, the police salvaged for half a month but found nothing. Besides, Miss Sylvie's only relative was her elderly grandmother, so they gave up. Axel's voice wasn't loud. Only Kalen and I could hear it. I saw Kalen's face turn ashen in an instant. Then he tremblingly pressed the hang-up button and opened the message Axel sent him. Inside was the news about my car accident 4 years ago. Although it was only a veiled report that the person who fell into the sea was a woman surnamed Sue, as long as one paid a little attention to the date of my disappearance, one could guess it was me. I leaned close to him, trying to blow his hair, and said in a mocking tone, Look, everyone said I was dead, but you didn't believe it. Kalen, why are you still the same as before? No matter what I say, you never believe me. As soon as I finished speaking, Kalen spat out a mouthful of blood. The bright red blood spilled on the red carpet and disappeared in an instant. Everyone was in a panic, and Morgane was also stunned. Kalen, who had just spat out blood, fell straight down. Kalen! I shouted and rushed over, wanting to hold him up, but his body just passed through mine and fell straight onto the ground. The scene was in an uproar instantly. Kalen's parents were also frightened. Several people who reacted quickly carried Kalen into the car and rushed him to the hospital. I didn't know what to do next, so I could only float into the car and squat on Kalen's chest, staring at him. Kalen, didn't you say that you wouldn't even look at me even if I died? 15. When Kalen woke up again, I was floating around the room boredly. The VIP ward was indeed different from an ordinary ward. It was very spacious. I could even do several somersaults inside without any problem. Seeing that Kalen woke up, Kalen's parents rushed in quickly and Morgane came in with them. Kalen's mother asked with concern, Kalen, what's wrong with you? Are you too tired from work recently? Kalen smiled, Mom, I'm fine. Mom, could you all go out? I want to sleep quietly by myself for a while. Morgane opened her mouth as if she wanted to say something, but finally she could only follow Kalen's parents and walk out together. The ward became quiet again in an instant. However, Kalen suddenly threw off the quilt and moved his steps with difficulty towards the bathroom. I originally wanted to follow him, but then I thought it might not be appropriate, but strange sounds came from the bathroom. Driven by curiosity, I slipped inside. I saw Kalen crying with red eyes. Although he tried his best to hold back, the tears still gushed out crazily. In the end, he even started retching. I had experienced this feeling before. When a person is extremely sad, they will vomit. Kalen, so you weren't happy at all when you learned that I was dead, were you? After vomiting, Kalen washed up and then dragged his tired body back to the hospital bed. For some reason, Kalen fell asleep, and surprisingly, I, who was lying beside him, also fell asleep. I was woken up by Morgane's voice. She was still asking about his well-being in that innocent voice. Kaylin responded casually. Soon, Axel also came in. Seeing Axel, Kaylin asked, "Take me to the place where she had the accident. Also, make arrangements. I want to know exactly what happened in that car accident back then." A hint of panic flashed in Morgane's eyes when she heard this. Although it was only for a moment, I still caught it. I couldn't remember clearly what had happened when I fell into the sea and died. Perhaps it was because I was just a spirit. I had only remembered the bits and pieces of my time with Kaylin in recent days. 16 As soon as Kaylin and Axel left, I saw Morgane hurriedly dial a number. She looked very strange, so I followed her and floated out. "Have you dealt with the matter I asked you to handle? I know it's been 4 years, but you also know that once Kaylin wants to investigate, it's impossible for him not to find out. Are you sure there are no flaws? But what's going on now? For so many years, I've been trying every means to block any news that might let him know that that damned woman was dead. In the end, he still found out. It suddenly dawned on me that the damned woman in Morgane's mouth was me. I was so angry that I bared my teeth and brandished my claws, shouting curses at her. You're the damned woman. Wait, so my death wasn't an accident but carefully planned by Morgane? How dare she kill someone? I angrily rushed towards Morgane again and again. However, I just passed through her body back and forth. In the end, I was also tired, so I simply followed Kaylin, wanting to see the place where I died. After all, I heard that my body hadn't been salvaged yet. TSK, how pitiful. Floating into Kaylin's car, I happened to see Axel handing him the repaired phone. I finally understood what it meant by misfortunes never come singly. Today, with a heart as dead as ashes, I watched Kaylin turn on my phone and enter the unlock password. Unfortunately, he guessed it right again. The password was his birthday. If I hadn't died so suddenly and hadn't had time to change it, I definitely wouldn't have let him succeed. Soon he saw the private message on my social media app, saw Morgane's provocation towards me and the photos she sent me. I simply floated in front of him and cursed, "You scumbag. Do you see it now? It was you who betrayed me, not the other way around. You slept with her. You're so disgusting, so dirty." After reading the messages, Kaylin's hands kept trembling. Finally, he simply closed his eyes and asked painfully, "Sylvie, why didn't you tell me back then? It's all my fault, it's all my fault." Yes, it was all his fault. 17 In fact, I had asked him about it back then. On the day after Morgane sent me the photos, I went to his office and questioned him. "Kaylin, did you fuck Morgane?" But Kaylin suddenly seemed like a different person and sneered at me. "So what if I did? Sylvie, who are you to me? Why should I report everything to you? Don't think I don't know what you've been doing behind my back. Listen carefully. I, Kaylin, have never loved you." He had told me he loved me just the day before, but today he was hugging another woman and denying everything. I stared blankly at all this, unable to believe my ears. Until later, Morgane looked down at me with a smile and said, "Sylvie, to tell you the truth, you're just a substitute for Kaylin's feelings. Now that I, the real girlfriend, am back, you, the substitute, had better get out of here as far as you can." I clearly remembered that just a few days ago, he had held me in his arms and looked at me smugly, saying, "Sylvie, you were so naughty last night. I'm yours now, and you have to be responsible for me." Now that I think about it, we actually had a lot of sweet times too. Soon, the car arrived at the destination. After getting out of the car, Kaylin walked straight to the trunk, took out a set of diving equipment and put it on. Axel was shocked by his action. Before he could say anything, Kaylin had already found the right position and jumped into the sea with a leap. I also jumped in with him. The seawater was very deep, and it was darker the further down we went. Even though I was now a spirit, I was still a bit scared. This time, he died for a long time. Even when his oxygen was almost running out, he was reluctant to leave. Axel had already started urging, "President Kaylin, the oxygen is almost gone. You'd better come up. If this goes on, you'll lose your life too." He didn't say a word and continued diving towards the seabed. Actually, even I was almost out of patience. The seawater was so deep and cold. The deeper we went, the lower the air pressure was. Even professionals couldn't salvage me, let alone him? Just when I was about to float back to the shore, I heard Kalen's trembling voice. He said, "I found it." 18 Following the direction of his flashlight, I saw an abandoned vehicle sunk at the bottom of the sea. The body of the vehicle was already wrapped with seaweed. The powerful pressure had broken the glass, making the inside of the car a paradise for fish. At this moment, I saw my own skeleton. Kalen quickly swam over and froze there as if he couldn't believe it. Then he quickly unfastened the seat belt on the skeleton and carefully removed the seaweed wrapped around it. When he saw the diamond ring on the skeleton's finger, Kalen choked out, "Sylvie. How ironic. That diamond ring was the one he gave me when he proposed to me. Now we met again in such a way." The reminder that the oxygen was about to run out rang at this time. I began to worry and desperately urged him to leave quickly, but obviously, because of the lack of oxygen, Kalen couldn't support himself to leave at all. He reached out and gently held the skeleton in his arms, continuing to murmur, "Sylvie, I'm sorry. I've kept you waiting for so long." Kalen was rescued by Axel. When he was brought ashore, even though he was already unconscious, he was still tightly holding my bones in his arms. Kalen was in a coma for 2 full days and 2 nights this time. The first thing he did when he opened his eyes was to look for my skeleton. Fortunately, Axel told him in time, "President Kalen, I've already properly arranged Miss Sylvie's remains. Don't worry. Without your instructions, no one can handle them without permission." Kalen nodded, looking ashen. "Keep investigating the matter I asked you to." Axel left. I rested my chin on my hand and floated around in front of him, unable to hold back my nagging. "Kalen, the murderer is Morgane. Why can't you suspect her?" Originally lying down, Kalen seemed to think of something. He slowly got up from the bed and walked step by step to the outside of the ward. There were very few people on this floor of the VIP ward. As soon as he went out, he heard Morgane's voice on the phone. "If he finds out, I can't escape, and you won't survive either. All the people involved in that woman back then have been dealt with cleanly." I knew that Morgane's good days were coming to an end. Sure enough, in the next second, I saw Kalen approaching Morgane with bloodshot eyes, looking as if he wanted to devour her. Seeing Kalen like this and thinking about the content of the phone call just now, Morgane seemed to be frightened too. She timidly called out, "Kalen?" 19 Who would have thought that as soon as she finished speaking, Kalen immediately pounced on her, tightly gripping her neck and pinning her against the wall. "Why did you harm Sylvie? Why did you deceive me?" And deceive her? Clearly, there was nothing between you and me. "Morgane, I trusted you so much. I'll kill you." The strength in his hands grew tighter and tighter, and Morgane's face grew paler and paler, looking as if she could hardly breathe. I was stunned at once. What did Kalen just say? He said there was nothing between them? I didn't believe it. If there was really nothing between them, why didn't he ever explain when I questioned him? Why did he still have an ambiguous relationship with Morgane while he was with me? I coldly watched this scene. For a moment, I really hoped that Kalen would strangle her to death. Axel rushed over and pulled Kalen's hands away, gasping for breath. "President Kalen, you can't do this. Miss Sylvie died so unjustly. If you directly strangle the chief culprit to death, wouldn't it be letting her off too easily?" Kalen suddenly stiffened his body. Morgane got a chance to breathe. Her body uncontrollably slumped to the ground, and then she coughed violently. After she finished coughing, she tearfully pleaded with a pitiful look, "Kalen, I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Kalen, I was so obsessed that I lost my mind. It's all because I love you too much. I didn't want anyone to take you away from me." Kalen gritted his teeth and squeezed out a sentence through them, "Get out. I don't want to see your disgusting face again." Morgane was stunned and stared blankly at the man she had loved for more than 10 years. "I'll ask Axel to sort out all the evidence accusing you of murdering Sylvie. You'll spend the rest of your life in prison. Get out." Morgane was startled and stumbled away from here. I thought I would be very angry too, but looking at Kalen with red eyes, I suddenly let go of my grudges. I sat beside him and chattered, "Come on. You're a grown man. Why do you look like you're about to cry again?" "Look, I'm not even crying. What a pity that I died so young. Do you know? There were so many places that I hadn't been to yet." Just as I was talking, I heard Kalen say, "You go out too. You must handle the matter I assigned to you properly. I don't care what method you use, how much money or what price you pay. I want you to hire the best lawyer and make Morgane stay in prison for the rest of her life." Axel replied and went out. Kalen smiled bitterly, his eyes red. He talked to himself, "Sylvie, I'm sorry. I misunderstood you. You said Morgane wasn't a good person. I should have believed you. 20 Actually, during the 2 days when Kalen was in the hospital, I went home to visit Grandma. The old lady seemed to be doing quite well. Several old ladies came to the community. They all had no teeth. The few of them sat at home chatting and looked very happy. It's just that when the old ladies accidentally mentioned their granddaughters, they would suddenly fall silent. Grandma didn't remember anything. She talked eloquently about how excellent her well-behaved and sensible granddaughter was and how handsome her grandson-in-law was. I think it's actually quite good that Grandma doesn't remember those things. When I returned to the hospital, Kalen was packing his things. He put his mobile phone on the bedside, took off his valuables, and then took my mobile phone and a letter from somewhere. Avoiding the hospital's surveillance, he came to the garage on the second basement floor of the hospital. I didn't know what he was going to do. I vaguely felt that something was wrong. Seeing him sitting expressionlessly in the driver's seat, I immediately followed and sat in. I shouted at him, "Kalen, where are you going? Why didn't you even bring your phone and your valuables?" He couldn't hear me. He just stepped on the accelerator and drove away. I was a bit flustered and watched helplessly as he stepped on the accelerator hard and rushed towards the coastal highway. Even though the car music was playing my favorite song, it couldn't relieve my anxiety at this time. This stupid man. Could it be that he wanted to die for love? Just when I thought Kalen would drive the car into the sea, he stopped the car instead. I touched my chest that no longer beat and let out a long sigh of relief. "Damn man, you scared me to death. I thought you were going to jump into the sea." Kalen closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and then took out a lighter. He picked up the envelope that had been on the passenger seat and lit it. "Sylvie, I'm sorry. Sylvie, are you around? If there are really souls in this world, please, you must accept my letter." The flames slowly rose up, and a letter gradually appeared in my hand. On it were written the words, "For Sylvie's eyes only." 21 Sylvie, I'm very sorry to talk to you in this way. But Sylvie, I really don't know what else I can do. I'm so stupid. You've been gone for 4 years, but I thought you were still alive. I'm so dull. It was only until now that I realized Morgane had easily deceived me with just a few photoshopped pictures. I didn't even know that she had secretly sent you those kinds of photos and messages. Sylvie, I swear that I've never touched her. From the beginning to the end, I only had you. And you were never a substitute for anyone, let alone hers. You're just you. Remember when you once asked me why I chose you and when I started having feelings for you? I'll tell you the answer now. It was at that party. You couldn't even protect yourself but still went to protect others. You were so silly and cute, so I fell for you. Do you know, Sylvie? I saw your alternate account on your mobile phone. Inside it, you actually recorded every little bit of our time together. There were our first date, our first kiss, and our first. Sylvie, Grandma was right. You're a kind-hearted and delicate girl. I let you down. I saw that the last sentence you wrote on the social media was, "Kalen, if I really died, what about you? Would you die with me?" Now I can tell you that I would. Sylvie, wait for me, okay? The alternate account was indeed where I kept my diary. Everything inside was set to be visible only to myself. There were only a few hundred words, but it took me a long time to read them. By the time I came to my senses, I heard the sound of Kalen stepping on the accelerator. The front of the Maybach was facing the sea, and at this time, when he stepped on the accelerator, I knew clearly what he wanted to do. "Kalen, are you crazy? I don't want you to die for love. You stay alive. Stay alive, okay? But he couldn't hear my shouts. The car rushed directly towards the sea at this time. Memories began to flood back. It was as if I had returned to the day when I fell into the sea. Countless seawater rushed in, choking my nose, throat, and lungs, burning with pain. Death isn't scary. What's scary is the process of dying. Seeing the seawater gradually submerging the Maybach, I jumped into the sea without hesitation. Even though I knew that even if I jumped into the sea, there was nothing I could do. But I still plunged in and watched helplessly as Kalen closed his eyes and was submerged by the seawater. I got into the car and looked at him with his eyes closed. Wasn't the handsome man with sharp features in front of me the one I had once loved deeply? But now, he was going to die too. The sea was so deep. I sank deeper and deeper together with Kalen. Just when I was feeling sad, a voice came from behind me. Sylvie, is it really you? I turned around and saw Kalen floating outside the car window. Then I looked at the other Kalen who was still in the car. I understood that the one outside was his spirit. It's me. Kalen looked at me, seeming very happy. He asked, Sylvie, can you take me with you? Take him with me? Of course not. I shook my head. No, you can't die, Kalen. You have to hold on. They'll come to rescue you soon. Kalen, I'm already dead. I can't take care of Grandma. If you can survive, could you please take care of Grandma for me? She's the only one I'm worried about in this world. I paused for a moment as I said this. It seemed that besides Grandma, I had forgotten someone who was very, very important to me. But who was she? I couldn't remember at all. Kalen smiled bitterly and asked, what about me? You? Kalen, there will be people who love you and you love in the future. Start your life anew. I seemed to hear a voice coming. Then the Maybach was lifted up by something. Someone had discovered Kalen who had jumped into the sea. I knew that he was going to be saved. Kalen was rescued. Not long after he and the car were salvaged, an invisible force pulled him back again. I smiled and waved at him. Please take good care of my grandma, please. I tried my best to keep my expression in the most beautiful state in his memory. 23 When Kalen woke up again, I was still by his side. The moment he opened his eye sockets turned red. Unfortunately, with the oxygen tube still inserted, he couldn't speak for the time being. He could only turn his eyeballs to look at Axel. Axel understood what he meant. He leaned closer, took out his phone, and lifted his hand. Kalen typed 2 words on it, Grandma. He really remembered that he had promised to take care of Grandma for me. Axel took a look at these 2 words and immediately understood. Then he closed his eyes, and tears of remorse flowed from the corners of his eyes. What was the use of regretting? I was already dead. I squatted on his chest, looking at his face that was both in great pain and looked a bit ridiculous. Actually, I should be laughing. Laughing at him for choosing that woman, laughing at him for being in such pain, laughing that he deserved to suffer like this. But I still couldn't help sniffing. I felt extremely sad. I went back to stay with Grandma again. Kalen kept his promise. He found the best caregivers to take care of Grandma. Even assistantly would chat with her. Grandma was happy every day, and I happily floated around in the air. One day, when Axel was telling Grandma a story, Kalen came. Seeing Kalen, Grandma suddenly asked, Young man, are you Sylvie's friend? You're so handsome. You and my Sylvie are a perfect match. Kalen smiled and his eyes turned red again. He hugged Grandma and then said softly, Yes, Grandma. Sylvie has gone on a business trip to a faraway place. She asked me to accompany you during this period. It turned out that Grandma's illness had become more and more serious. Axel accompanied Grandma, and Kalen walked into my room again. Seeing the photos that he had torn to pieces before, his body began to tremble uncontrollably. Fortunately, Axel noticed in time and supported him. President Kalen? Kalen waved his hand. I'm fine. Then he pushed away Axel's hand that was supporting him. Step by step, he walked into my room. Looking at the photos that he had torn to pieces last time still on the cabinet, he began to try hard to piece them together. 24 later, he found my diary in the drawer. After opening it and seeing that his name was written on every page, Kalen broke down again. Because I wrote in the diary, Kalen, we will always be together. Kalen, you promised me that you would love me for a lifetime. Kalen, how could you have another woman behind my back? Kalen, would you only be happy if I died? Those were the questions that had once troubled me, but now I knew the answers. Thanks to Kalen's meticulous care, Grandma lived a happy life. I continued to stay by her side, watching this lovely old lady. Suddenly one day, the old lady grabbed Kalen's hand and stared at him, saying, "Sylvie gave birth to a daughter for you." As she said that, she also took out the ultrasound report that had been buried at the bottom of the box and showed it to him. Kalen was stunned. His whole body was trembling. He asked in a hoarse voice, "We have a daughter? Grandma, where is she now?" But no matter how he asked, Grandma didn't know. And at this time, my head seemed to buzz. I remembered. The most important person I had forgotten, besides Grandma, was our daughter. On his birthday that day, besides giving him a gift, I also wanted to tell him the news that I was pregnant. But the next day, we broke up. I didn't originally want to keep the child. But when I thought that it was also a little life, I gritted my teeth and gave birth to her. Who would have thought that when the child was just a few months old, this happened? After I died, Grandma fell seriously ill. The elderly old lady, with a baby in her arms and being sick herself, couldn't raise the child at all. Finally, the people in the community decided to send the child to the welfare home. I lost those memories and didn't even know which welfare home the child was finally sent to. Next, I witnessed with my own eyes that Morgaine was locked up in prison and sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. I knew that this was the result that Kalen had achieved with his greatest efforts. Let Morgaine neither die nor get out. I also saw Kalen rebury my body, and on the tombstone was engraved my wife Sylvie. 25 Morgaine, who was locked up in prison, when it was the third year, suddenly asked to see Kalen, saying that she had news that he would want to know. Kalen actually didn't want to see her, but he was afraid of missing any news about our daughter, so he met her. Morgaine looked at him through the glass and giggled foolishly. "Kalen, I thought I would never see you again in this lifetime. I still don't understand until now. Where exactly did I lose to her?" Kalen's patience had run out. He said with disgust, "Where's the news you mentioned? If you just want to say such nonsense, then don't say it anymore." As if afraid that Kalen would really leave, Morgaine suddenly said, "I know you two have a child." Kalen's fist suddenly clenched tightly. "Tell me, where is the child? What on earth did you do to our child?" Morgaine giggled, talking to herself as if she were crazy. "I had everything, but I just wanted a man. Why did she have to interfere? Why did she have to get pregnant with your child? I could have let her go, but since she gave birth to your child, she deserved to die. I really shouldn't have shown mercy and let that old hag and the child go. I knew that this woman had gone completely crazy. She was so crazy to get Kalen." Kalen wanted to continue asking something, but Morgaine suddenly spat out blood. Seeing this, Kalen frowned and asked, "Morgaine, what did you swallow?" Morgaine had a painful look on her face, but there was still a smile on it. "Poison. It's impossible for me to get out of prison in this lifetime. But asking them to get me some poison, how could it be impossible? Kalen, I want you to live with regret and loneliness until you die. What I can't have, no one else can have." Morgaine died, and the clue to our daughter was cut off again. In the following days, Kalen had been inquiring about where our daughter was. But it seemed that God was playing a joke. Until Grandma passed away at the age of 98, he still couldn't find her. The only news he got was that our daughter had been adopted by a wealthy family. Fortunately, Grandma had lived a happy life in the last 20 years. Until the moment she left, her face was full of smiles. When Andrew was 65 years old, his first love was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease.